They say you should never underestimate the quiet ones, especially when that quiet one has an MBA from Wharton and has been balancing the books in her head for 10 years. Tonight, Alaric Sterling thinks he's about to trade his wife in for a younger model in front of high society's elite. He's standing on a stage microphone in hand, smugly preparing to announce his new direction. What he doesn't know is that 3 hours ago his wife didn't just file for divorce, she authorized a forensic audit that is currently freezing his assets in real time. Alaric is about to find out that while he was busy looking for a trophy, Vivian was busy loading the gun. Welcome to the downfall of the year. The mirror in the master suite of the Sterling estate did not lie, though it was framed in gold leaf that cost more than most people's cars. It reflected a woman who looked perfectly composed yet entirely hollowed out. Vivian Sterling smoothed the emerald silk of her gown. It was a darker shade of green, almost black in the dim light of the dressing room, a color chosen specifically to blend into the background. That was her role after all. She was the scenery, the texture to Alaric's life. She was the one who remembered the names of board members' wives, who knew which allergies the senator had, and who ensured the charity galas ran under budget. "Are you ready yet?" The voice cut through the silence like a serrated knife. Alaric stood in the doorway. He looked undeniably handsome in his bespoke Savile Row tuxedo, the velvet lapels catching the light. At 52, he had maintained the rugged jawline and aggressive posture of a man who believed the world owed him its submission. "Almost Alaric," Vivian said, turning to face him. She didn't smile. She hadn't truly smiled at him since the discovery 3 months ago. "I was just fixing the clasp." Alaric sighed, checking his Patek Philippe watch, a gift she had bought him for their 20th anniversary. "We need to be at the Ritz-Carlton by 7 sharp. The board is expecting a show of strength tonight. With the merger on the horizon, everything has to be perfect." He walked over not to touch her but to grab his platinum cufflinks from the dresser. He smelled of expensive scotch and a perfume that wasn't hers. Santal 33. It was trendy young and clung to his collar. "It will be a night to remember," Vivian said softly. Alaric laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "It certainly will. Look, Viv, there's going to be an adjustment tonight. A shift in the narrative. I'm going to make some announcements during the keynote speech about the future of Sterling Haycorp and about my personal life." He finally looked at her, his eyes cold and devoid of guilt. He looked at her not like a wife, but like an employee he was preparing to fire. "I think it's time we stop pretending, don't you?" He continued, adjusting his cuffs. "I need vitality, Vivian. I need someone who represents the new era of the company. You've been fine, supportive. But the company is evolving. I'm evolving." "Is she coming tonight?" Vivian asked. Her voice didn't tremble. Alaric paused. He didn't even have the decency to look shocked that she knew. "Chloe is my executive assistant. Of course she'll be there." "I mean, is she coming as your assistant or as the reason for your evolution?" Alaric straightened his jacket, a smirk playing on his lips. "You've always been smart, Viv. Too smart for your own good sometimes. Yes, I'm introducing Chloe tonight, not as a mistress, as my partner. It's better this way. Clean break. The lawyers will send you the papers on Monday. You'll be taken care of course. A nice condo in Florida, a stipend. Enough to keep you comfortable." He turned to leave, checking his reflection one last time. "Just try not to make a scene, all right, for the sake of the share price." He walked out. Vivian stood alone in the massive walk-in closet. A stipend. A condo in Florida. He spoke as if he were retiring a racehorse. She reached into her jewelry box, but instead of reaching for the diamond choker Alaric had given her to shut her up after his last affair, she reached for a simple vintage brooch. It belonged to her grandmother. She pinned it to her chest. It was a small silver dagger. "I won't make a scene, Alaric," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to make history." She picked up her phone. There was one unread message from a number saved simply as JH. "It's done. The server access is confirmed. The kill switch is primed. Just give the signal." Vivian typed back 2 words. Initiate protocol. She grabbed her clutch, took a deep breath, and walked out of the room to join her husband for his execution. To understand why Alaric Sterling was walking into a buzzsaw, one had to look back exactly 6 hours prior. Vivian sat in a booth at the back of Le Monde, a small dimly lit bistro in the financial district that didn't attract the tech bro crowd or the flashier hedge fund managers. It was a place for old money and serious conversations. Across from her sat Julian Hayes. Julian was a forensic accountant at Deloitte before he started his own boutique firm, Hayes & Associates. He was also the man Vivian almost married 25 years ago before the flash and charisma of Alaric Sterling swept her off her feet. Julian had gray at his temples now, and he wore wire-rimmed glasses that hid eyes that missed nothing. He had a stack of documents on the table thick enough to be a novel. "You realize what happens the moment you sign this, Viv?" Julian asked, his hand resting protectively over the file. "There's no going back. This isn't just a divorce filing. This is a whistleblowing report to the SEC, the IRS, and a formal request for an internal audit based on spousal knowledge of embezzlement." Vivian took a sip of her black coffee. "I know." "Alaric isn't just cheating on the taxman," Julian said, lowering his voice. "He's been aggressive. Stupidly aggressive. I've gone through the backups you mirrored from his private server. He's funneling capital from the pension fund into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands called Nebula Holdings. He's using that money to leverage high-risk crypto bets and, well, to fund a very expensive lifestyle for Ms. Valance." Vivian's expression remained stony. "How much?" "Over $12 million in the last 18 months, Julian said, "and he's cooking the quarterly reports to hide the deficit. He's categorizing the outflows as R&D consultation fees, but the consulting firm doesn't exist. It's just a P.O. box in Georgetown." Julian slid a specific page toward her. "This is the kicker. He signed off on these transfers using your digital signature key. The one he asked you to set up for estate planning last year." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "He's trying to frame me." "Exactly," Julian nodded grimly. "If this implodes on its own, the paper trail leads to you. You're the director of the Sterling Family Trust. He set you up as the fall guy. He gets the girl, you get the prison sentence." The realization settled in Vivian's chest like cold lead. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a premeditated disposal. Alaric hadn't just fallen out of love, he had been building a trap door beneath her feet for a year. "If we trigger the audit tonight," Vivian said, her voice sharpening, "what happens? I have a contact at the bank, Silas Montgomery's nephew, actually. He works in compliance. If I flag these transactions as suspicious activity with a priority 1 status, the bank's algorithm automatically freezes the assets pending investigation. It's immediate. It shuts down the corporate credit lines, his personal accounts, and the company's slush fund. And the board. Silas Montgomery is the chairman. He's old school. He hates scandal. If he gets wind that the feds are looking at the books, he'll cut Alaric's throat to save the stock price." Julian leaned forward. "But Viv, you have to be sure. Alaric will be destroyed. He'll lose the CEO chair. He'll likely face criminal charges. This is the nuclear option." Vivian picked up the pen. She remembered the way Alaric had looked at her that morning, like she was a piece of furniture he was tired of dusting. She remembered the receipts she found for a penthouse in Tribeca leased in Chloe's name. But mostly she remembered the signature key. He was going to send her to jail. "He built the bomb, Julian," Vivian said, signing her name with a flourish on the dotted line. "I'm just lighting the fuse." She pushed the documents back to him. "When does it hit?" Julian checked his watch. "The gala starts at 7. I'll time the notification to hit the board of directors email server at 8:00 p.m., just as the keynote speeches begin." "Make it 8:15, Vivian corrected. "That's when he's scheduled to make his big personal announcement. I want him to feel the ground crumble while he's standing on it." Julian took the papers and slid them into his briefcase. He looked at her with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "You're terrifying, you know that. I was a good wife for 20 years, Julian. She stood up, smoothing her coat. Alaric forgot that before I was a wife, I was the valedictorian of our class. He thinks I'm just the woman who picks the flowers. Good luck tonight, Julian said. Vivian walked out of the bistro and into the blinding afternoon sun. She had 6 hours to get her hair done, put on her face, and prepare to play the role of the oblivious victim one last time. The audit was live. The trap was set. Now all she had to do was smile. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. This was the Sterling Hay annual gala, the biggest night in the city's corporate calendar. Cameras flashed as Alaric and Vivian stepped out of the limousine. Alaric switched on his CEO face, instantly a dazzling, confident grin that had charmed investors out of billions over the years. He placed a hand on the small of Vivian's back. To the photographers it looked possessive, loving. To Vivian it felt like a branding iron. "Smile, darling," he hissed through his teeth as they waved. "Try not to look so drab." They moved through the gauntlet of press. "Mr. Sterling, is it true Sterling Hay is acquiring the Omni Group?" a reporter shouted. "No comment, but keep your eyes on the ticker tomorrow." Alaric winked. He was in his element. He felt invincible. Inside the room was buzzing. Waiters with silver trays navigated through clusters of the city's elite. Vivian spotted Silas Montgomery, the chairman of the board, holding court near the ice sculpture. Silas was a heavy-set man with a white mustache and eyes like flint. He nodded at Alaric, a sign of approval. Alaric guided Vivian to their table at the front, the place of honor. But as they approached, Vivian saw her, Chloe Valance. She was impossible to miss. She was wearing a dress that was technically red, but so bright and cut so low it screamed for attention. She was 24, with blonde hair that tumbled in perfect waves and skin that had never known stress. She was seated at the table directly next to theirs, far too close for an executive assistant. When Chloe saw Alaric, her face lit up with a conspiratorial smile. She barely glanced at Vivian. To Chloe, Vivian was already a ghost. "Alaric," Chloe chirped, standing up. "The teleprompter is set. I made those changes to the speech you asked for." "Excellent work, Chloe," Alaric said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming husky. He lingered a moment too long near her. Vivian took her seat, arranging her napkin on her lap. She felt a vibration in her clutch. It was 7:45 p.m. 30 minutes. A waiter poured vintage Dom Perignon into her glass. Vivian took a sip, watching the room. She saw the CFO, Marcus Dent. "No, wait, Marcus is banned. Let's call him Greg Pender." She saw Greg Pender sweating, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Greg was Alaric's lapdog. If Alaric was embezzling, Greg knew. And Greg looked nervous. Perhaps Greg had noticed the strange ping on the server earlier. Or perhaps he was just terrified of what Alaric was about to do to his wife publicly. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "please take your seats. Dinner is served." Alaric leaned over to Vivian. "I'm going up to the stage in 20 minutes. After the appetizer, I suggest you don't look surprised when I bring Chloe up." "You're bringing her up on stage?" Vivian asked, feigning shock. "It's a new era, Viv. Transparency. I'm telling the world that Sterling Hay is a modern company led by a man who isn't afraid to follow his heart." "You're conflating your libido with corporate strategy, Alaric." Alaric's eyes went dark. "Careful. Don't spoil your severance package before you even get it." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I have to prep. Enjoy the salad." He walked away, heading toward the backstage area where Chloe was already waiting, clutching a clipboard and looking starstruck. Vivian watched him go. She took out her phone and placed it face up on the table next to her salad fork. 7:55 p.m. Across the room, she saw Silas Montgomery check his BlackBerry. He frowned. He tapped the screen, looking confused. Then he looked up, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Greg Pender, the CFO. Silas motioned for Greg. It was a sharp, aggressive hand gesture. Greg hurried over to the chairman. They whispered. Silas's face turned a shade of purple that matched the centerpieces. It was starting. The email from Julian Hayes had landed. Subject notice of forensic audit. Immediate freeze of assets. Sterling Hay Corp. Vivian picked up a breadstick and took a bite. It was delicious. The lights in the grand ballroom dimmed, casting the hundreds of guests into a hush of anticipation. A single intense spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the center stage. Alaric Sterling stepped into the beam. He looked every inch the titan of industry he believed himself to be. The tuxedo fit him like a second skin. His hair was perfectly coiffed. He gripped the microphone not with nervousness but with the familiarity of a rock star holding a guitar. He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be commanding. "Thank you." Alaric began, his voice booming through the high-quality sound system. "Friends, colleagues, competitors?" A ripple of polite laughter. "Tonight is about legacy. It's about looking at where Sterling Hay has been, and more importantly, where we are going." At table 1, Vivian watched him. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. To anyone looking at her, she was the devoted wife watching her husband's triumph. But she wasn't watching Alaric. She was watching the room. At 8:16 p.m., a soft, synchronized sound began to fill the silence beneath Alaric's voice. It was the sound of vibration. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. It started at the chairman's table. Silas Montgomery's phone lit up on the tablecloth, then Greg Pender's, then the general counsel's. Alaric, blinded by the stage lights, couldn't see the audience clearly. He only saw the glare. He continued, oblivious. "We have had a record year, but growth requires change. It requires the shedding of old skin to reveal something new, something vibrant." Silas Montgomery picked up his phone. The screen's glow illuminated a face that had gone from flush to ashen gray. He put on his reading glasses, his hand trembling slightly. He swiped open the email from Hayes & Associates. Urgent evidence of mass embezzlement and pension fund fraud detected. Alaric paced the stage, energized. "For too long I have played it safe. I have adhered to tradition. But I realized recently that a company like a man cannot survive without passion, without a muse." Greg Pender, the CFO, dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his china plate. He looked at Silas, panic in his eyes. He mouthed the word "feds." Silas didn't answer. He was reading the attachment, a PDF containing screenshots of wire transfers from the Sterling Hay Employee Pension Fund into Nebula Holdings, a shell company Alaric thought was impenetrable. "And that is why," Alaric announced, his voice reaching a crescendo, "tonight marks a personal and professional turning point. I am thrilled to introduce the new Director of Strategic Innovation and my partner in every sense of the word, Ms. Chloe Valance." This was the cue. Chloe emerged from the wings. She walked tentatively into the spotlight, her red dress blazing. She looked beautiful, but she also looked terrified. Unlike Alaric, she could see the front row. She could see Silas Montgomery slowly standing up. "Come here, Chloe," Alaric said, extending a hand. He turned to the audience, expecting applause. There was silence. Not the respectful silence of a captivated audience, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a room that had just witnessed a murder. "Alaric!" a voice boomed from the floor. It wasn't a question. It was a gavel strike. Alaric squinted against the light. "Silas, sit down, we're just getting to the good part." Silas Montgomery did not sit down. He walked toward the stage, clutching his phone like a weapon. The chairman was 70 years old, a man who had survived 3 recessions and a hostile takeover attempt in the 90s. He did not fear Alaric Sterling. "Turn off the microphone, Alaric," Silas said, his voice carrying without amplification. "Excuse me." Alaric laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "Silas, have you had too much of the Cabernet? We're in the middle of a broadcast." "There is no broadcast," Silas shouted, finally losing his composure. "You are done. Get off that stage." The murmurs began. A low roar of confusion and gossip swept through the room. People were checking their emails now. The notification had been CC'd to the entire board and the top 50 shareholders. "What is this?" Alaric demanded, his ego finally bristling. "You can't interrupt me. I'm the CEO of this company." "Not anymore," Silas yelled. He climbed the stairs to the stage, disregarding his age. He walked right up to Alaric and Chloe. Chloe took a step back, sensing the violence in the air. "What are you talking about?" Alaric hissed, covering the mic. Silas held up his phone, displaying the email. "You stole from the pension fund, Alaric. $12 million. We have the bank records. We have the IP logs. We have the digital signatures." Alaric froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Nebula Holdings. How that was buried. That was encrypted. "That's a lie." Alaric stammered, his face pale. That's a clerical error. I can explain. You used the employee retirement accounts to buy crypto and pay for her apartment." Silas pointed a shaking finger at Chloe. The microphone picked it up. The entire room heard it. Employee retirement accounts. A collective gasp went through the room. Embezzling from the company was one thing. Stealing the retirement money of the workers was a social death sentence. Alaric looked at the crowd. He saw disgust. He saw shock. And then he looked for the one person he always relied on to fix his messes. "Vivian!" Alaric shouted into the crowd, shielding his eyes. "Vivian, tell them. Tell them about the estate planning. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." The spotlight operator, sensing the drama, widened the beam. It swept over the crowd and landed on table 1. Vivian Sterling didn't stand up. She remained seated, her posture perfect. She picked up her glass of champagne, looked directly at her husband on stage, and took a slow, deliberate sip. She didn't say a word. The silence from her was louder than any scream. "Vivian," Alaric pleaded, his voice cracking. "For God's sake, say something." Vivian set the glass down. She looked at Silas Montgomery, who was still standing on stage, breathing heavily. "Mr. Chairman," Vivian said, her voice clear and calm, projecting effortlessly to the stage. "I believe the email attachment includes my affidavit, confirming that I did not authorize those transfers." Silas looked down at his phone, scrolling. "It does. Affidavit of Vivian Sterling filed 2:00 p.m. today." Alaric looked at his wife. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The signature key. The estate planning. She hadn't just known. She had handed the gun to the executioner. "You," Alaric whispered. "You did this." "I merely balanced the books, Alaric," Vivian said. "You always said I was good with numbers." The chaos that followed was less of a corporate dispute and more of a feeding frenzy. Security personnel, burly men in earpieces who usually stood by the exits looking bored, were now moving toward the stage. Silas Montgomery had evidently signaled them. "Escort Mr. Sterling off the premises," Silas commanded, "and ensure he does not access any company devices." "You can't do this," Alaric shouted, backing away. He looked at Chloe for support, but Chloe was currently trying to make herself invisible behind a decorative fern. "Chloe, tell them this is a setup." Chloe Valance looked at Alaric. Then she looked at the security guards. Then she looked at the crowd of angry billionaires. I didn't know," Chloe stammered, her voice shrill. "I was just his assistant. He told me the money was a bonus. I didn't know he stole it." "Chloe?" Alaric looked betrayed. "We are partners." "I'm not going to jail for you, Alaric," she shrieked, hitching up her red dress and hurrying down the stairs away from him. 2 guards grabbed Alaric by the arms. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" Alaric struggled, his dignity shedding like snakeskin. "I built this company. I am Sterling Hay." They dragged him down the stairs. The audience parted like the Red Sea, nobody wanting to be touched by the contagion of his failure. They held up their phones, recording the spectacle. Alaric Sterling, the man who wanted to be the face of the future, was now a viral TikTok trend. As they dragged him past table 1, Alaric dug his heels in. He stopped directly in front of Vivian. He was panting, his hair disheveled, his bow tie crooked. He looked at her with pure hatred. "You bitch," he spat. "You ruined everything. You think you've won. I have millions stashed away that you don't know about. I'll fight this. I'll destroy you." Vivian stood up slowly. She was slightly shorter than him, but in that moment she towered over him. "You have nothing, Alaric," she said softly. Julianne Hayes initiated a Title IV freeze on all assets connected to your Social Security number and the Cayman accounts. As of 8:02 p.m., your credit cards are declined. Your checking account is locked. Even your Tesla won't start because the lease is flagged for repossession. Alaric's eyes widened. My personal account. The house is in my name, Alaric. Remember, you put it in the trust to avoid taxes 3 years ago. The trust I control." Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You are homeless. You are penniless. And considering the SEC is waiting for you in the lobby, you are likely about to be incarcerated." Alaric slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked at the woman he had underestimated for 2 decades. He saw the steel beneath the silk. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why wait until tonight? You could have just divorced me." "Because Alaric—" Vivian leaned in, brushing a piece of lint off his lapel. "You wanted a spectacle. You wanted a memorable night. I simply gave you what you asked for." She nodded to the guards. "Take him away. He's upsetting the guests." The guards hauled him toward the exit. Alaric didn't struggle anymore. He was a hollow shell. The room was buzzing with kinetic energy. The gala was ruined, but the gossip was exquisite. Silas Montgomery took the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas said, his voice weary, "I apologize for the interruption. Please. The open bar is extended indefinitely." A cheer went up. The tension broke. Vivian picked up her clutch. She didn't want to stay for the free drinks. She had work to do. She walked toward the exit, her head held high. People stared at her. Some looked fearful, others respectful. She wasn't the scenery anymore. She was the most dangerous person in the room. As she reached the lobby, she saw Alaric being handcuffed by federal agents near the valet stand. The flashing blue lights of the police cars reflected off the glass facade of the Ritz-Carlton. Standing near the door, shivering in the night air, was Chloe. She was holding her phone, crying. Vivian paused. She could have walked past. She could have ignored the girl. Chloe was young, foolish, and greedy, but she was just a symptom of Alaric's disease. Vivian walked over to her. "He lied to you too, didn't he?" Vivian asked. Chloe looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. "He said he was leaving you. He said the money was from his stock options. I didn't know about the pension fund, I swear." "Ignorance is not a legal defense, Chloe," Vivian said sharply. "But if you're smart, you'll go to the district attorney right now, tonight, before Alaric's lawyers try to pin the wire transfers on you. You were his assistant. You sent the emails." Chloe's eyes went wide. "Oh my God." "Go," Vivian commanded. "Turn state's evidence. It's the only way you stay out of prison." Chloe didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels and ran toward the police cars, waving her arms, yelling, "I want to make a statement. I want to talk." Vivian watched her go. It was a small mercy. She walked out to the curb. Her driver, her personal driver paid for by the trust, pulled up in the Rolls-Royce. "Where to, Mrs. Sterling?" the driver asked as he opened the door. "Ms. Sterling," Vivian corrected him. "And take me to the office. I have a board meeting to prepare for in the morning. Someone has to clean up this mess." She slid into the leather seat. As the car pulled away, she took out her phone and sent one last text to Julian. "It's done. He's in custody. Meet me at the firm at 7:00 a.m. She closed her eyes, and finally, for the first time in months, she let herself breathe. But the story wasn't over. Alaric was down, but men like him didn't stay down without a fight. And there was still the matter of the $12 million. It was frozen, yes, but it wasn't recovered. And Vivian had a feeling that Alaric hadn't been working alone. The week following the gala was a blur of flashbulbs, lawyer conferences, and plummeting stock tickers. The media dubbed it the Red Carpet Massacre. Memes of Alaric being dragged off stage by security were circulating globally. Vivian sat in the CEO's office, her office now at least temporarily. The board had voted her in as interim CEO mostly because she was the only person who knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. The office still smelled like Alaric sandalwood and ego. Vivian was in the process of exorcising it. She had already ordered the leather couches removed and the heavy mahogany desk replaced with glass. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Sterling, Julian Hayes is here. He says it's urgent." "Send him in," Vivian said, not looking up from the quarterly projections. Julian burst in, and for the first time in 20 years the man looked rattled. His tie was loosened, and he was holding a tablet with a graph that was nosediving. "We have a problem," Julian said, slamming the tablet onto the desk. "A big one." Vivian frowned, picking up the device. "Is it the SEC? I thought we gave them everything." "It's not the SEC. It's the money. The $12 million in the Cayman account." Julian took a breath. "It's gone." Vivian froze. "That's impossible. We put a Title IV freeze on it. The bank confirmed it. Nothing goes in or out without a federal warrant." "That's what I thought," Julian said, pacing the room. "But at 4:00 a.m. this morning, the freeze was lifted for exactly 90 seconds. In that window, the entire balance of Nebula Holdings was wire transferred to a numbered account in Zurich. Then the account closed." "How?" Vivian stood up. "Who has the authority to lift a federal banking freeze?" "A federal judge," Julian said. "Or someone with a chairman's override on the bank's internal compliance system. Someone who knew the specific backdoor codes for the bank that handles Sterling Hayes' offshore assets." Vivian's mind raced. "Alaric is in a cell at the Metropolitan Detention Center. He doesn't have a phone, let alone a computer." "It wasn't Alaric," Julian said grimly. "The IP address for the authorization didn't come from the prison. It came from a secure residential line in the Hamptons." Vivian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. The Hamptons. "Silas," she whispered. Julian nodded. "Silas Montgomery, the chairman of the board, the man who dragged Alaric off the stage." "Why would Silas help Alaric move the money?" Vivian asked, trying to make the pieces fit. "He isn't helping Alaric," Julian corrected her. "He's stealing from him. Think about it, Viv. Silas has been chairman for 30 years. He knows every dirty trick in the book. If Alaric was embezzling, Silas had to know. He's the one who signs off on the external audits." "He let Alaric take the fall." Vivian realized, her eyes widening. "He let Alaric build the slush fund. Let him take the risk, and the moment I exposed Alaric, Silas swooped in, played the hero, and stole the loot while everyone was watching the arrest." "It's the perfect crime," Julian said. "Alaric goes to jail for the embezzlement. The money disappears into the ether of the investigation. Silas retires with an extra $12 million tax-free." Vivian walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. She had thought the game was over. She thought she had won. But she had just been a pawn in a bigger game played by an older, more ruthless master. "Does Alaric know?" she asked. "If he doesn't, he's the only one who can confirm Silas's involvement," Julian said. "Alaric is the only one who can tell us if Silas was a partner or just a vulture." Vivian grabbed her coat. "Call the car. I'm going to prison." The Metropolitan Detention Center was a stark contrast to the Ritz-Carlton. The walls were gray cinder block. The air smelled of bleach and despair. Alaric Sterling sat on the other side of the plexiglass. He had been in custody for 6 days, but he had aged 10 years. His bespoke suit was replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His hair was graying at the roots and his face was unshaven. He picked up the phone receiver, slowly looking at Vivian with dull, hateful eyes. "Come to gloat," Alaric rasped. "Or did you bring the divorce papers?" I'm here to make a deal, Vivian said, her voice steady. Alaric laughed, a dry cracking sound. I have nothing left to deal with, Viv. You made sure of that. The lawyers say I'm looking at 15 years. Chloe turned on me. Greg turned on me. I'm done. The money is gone, Alaric, Vivian said. Alaric frowned. I know. You froze it. No, it's gone. Transferred to Zurich. Stolen. Alaric's face twisted in confusion. That's not possible. Only I have the codes. You and your partner, Vivian said, watching him closely. I don't have a partner, Alaric snapped. I worked alone. Don't lie to me, Alaric. Vivian's voice rose, startling the guard behind her. She lowered her tone. Someone lifted the freeze. Someone with high-level banking clearance. Someone who lives in the Hamptons. Alaric went still. His eyes shifted back and forth, calculating. The arrogance drained out of him, replaced by a dawning horror. Silas, Alaric whispered. So he was involved. Alaric slumped against the chair. He wasn't involved. He was the architect. 2 years ago, Silas came to me. He said the pension fund was overperforming. He said we could skim the cream off the top and nobody would notice. He set up the shell companies. He introduced me to the guys in the Caymans. I took the risk, he took 30% of the cut. And now he has taken 100%, Vivian said. He played you, Alaric. He let you prance around with Chloe, let you get sloppy, and the moment I pulled the trigger, he cut you loose and took the cash. Alaric's hands curled into fists. That old bastard. He told me he'd protect me. He said if I ever got caught, he'd use his influence to kill the investigation. Instead, he handed you to the feds on a silver platter, Vivian said. He's going to let you rot in here while he sips martinis in Zurich. Alaric looked up at the ceiling, blinking back tears of rage. I want him dead. I can't give you that, Vivian said coolly. But I can give you revenge. I can take him down. But I need proof. I need the emails, the texts, the recordings. Silas is too smart to leave a paper trail on the company servers. He used a burner phone, Alaric said quickly. We communicated via an encrypted app. WISTR. And where is your phone, Alaric? The feds seized it. And they can't crack the encryption without the passcode. Vivian realized. Alaric looked at her. For the first time in years, they were on the same side. If I give you the passcode, if I give you Silas, what do I get? I can't get you out of prison, Alaric. You stole the money. You cheated. You broke the law. Vivian leaned in close to the glass. But if you give me Silas, I will speak to the district attorney. I will tell them you cooperated. I will get your sentence reduced. Maybe 5 years instead of 15. And I will make sure Silas Montgomery ends up in the cell right next to you. Alaric stared at her. He saw the woman he had married, the brilliance, the ruthlessness. He realized too late that she was the only partner he ever really needed. The code, Alaric said, leaning in, is your birthday, 04-12-76. Vivian felt a pang of something strange, not love but pity. He had used her birthday to lock away his secrets. Thank you, Alaric, she said. She stood up to leave. Vivian, he called out. She stopped. I really did love you. Once. Vivian didn't look back. Goodbye, Alaric. Monday morning in the financial district usually smelled of roasted coffee and exhaust fumes, but on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Hay Tower, the air smelled exclusively of fear. The emergency board meeting had been scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. By 8:45 a.m., every seat at the long polished granite table was filled save for 2. The board members, mostly older men with soft hands and hard eyes, spoke in hushed tones, checking their phones every few seconds as if expecting the stock price to physically detonate. At the head of the table sat Silas Montgomery. The chairman looked remarkably refreshed for a man whose company was currently the lead story on CNN, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. He wore a light gray Italian suit, a silk tie, and an expression of paternal disappointment. He wasn't radiating panic, he was projecting stability. He was the anchor in the storm. At the opposite end of the table, the chair reserved for the CEO sat empty. "Gentlemen," Silas said, checking his vintage Rolex, "it's 9:00 a.m. I believe we should begin. We have a lot of damage control to handle." "Shouldn't we wait for Mrs. Sterling?" asked Greg Pender, the CFO. Greg looked terrible. He had lost 10 pounds in a week, his skin pasty and slick with sweat. He knew he was complicit by negligence, and he was looking for a lifeboat. Silas smiled, a thin, tight expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Greg, please. Let's be realistic. Vivian is distraught. Her husband is in federal custody. Her marriage is over. She played her part in exposing Alaric, yes, and we are grateful. But she is hardly in a state to lead a multinational conglomerate through a federal indictment." He clasped his hands on the table, leaning forward. "The narrative we need to push is simple." Silas continued, his voice smooth as velvet. "Alaric Sterling was a rogue actor, a singular corrupted element. We, the board, were deceived just as much as the public. We are the victims here, and now that the cancer has been cut out, we can heal." "And the missing funds?" another board member asked. "The 12 million? We are working with the authorities," Silas lied without a tremor in his voice. "But frankly, that money is likely gone, burned in crypto markets. We will write it off as a loss, take the tax hit and move on. The priority now is leadership." Silas stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I have spoken to our major shareholders. Given the crisis, I'm willing to step down from the chairmanship and assume the role of interim CEO effective immediately. I will steer the ship until the waters calm. I trust I have your support." It wasn't a question. It was a command. The board members looked at each other. They were frightened sheep, and Silas was the only wolf offering to protect them. One by one, heads began to nod. "Excellent," Silas said, reaching for the gavel. "Then let the minutes show that—" The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a force that rattled the water glasses. Vivian Sterling walked in. She wasn't wearing the drab neutral colors she had worn for 20 years. She was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. She didn't look distraught. She looked like a predator entering a pen. Behind her walked Julian Hayes, carrying a thick leather briefcase, and two men in dark suits who didn't look like they worked in finance. They looked like they worked in enforcement. "I apologize for the delay," Vivian said, her voice cool and carrying effortlessly to the back of the room. "I had to make a stop at the Metropolitan Detention Center." Silas stiffened, but he recovered quickly. "Vivian, we were just discussing the transition. Given your personal situation, we felt it best if you took a leave of absence." "Is that so?" Vivian walked past the empty CEO chair. She didn't sit. She continued walking until she stood directly to the right of Silas, invading his personal space. "And who exactly were you planning to transition power to yourself?" "I am the chairman, Vivian," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning tone. "I am the only one with the experience to save this company from the fire your husband started." "My husband lit the match, Silas," Vivian corrected him. "But you bought the gasoline." A heavy silence descended on the room. Greg Pender stopped breathing. Silas laughed, a dismissive, incredulous sound. "This is hysteria. Grief makes people say wild things. Gentlemen, perhaps we should adjourn until Mrs. Sterling has had some rest." "Sit down, Silas," Vivian commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given with such absolute authority that Silas instinctively sat. Vivian turned to the board. "You are all wondering about the missing $12 million. Silas tells you it's gone, burned in crypto, a tragedy." She nodded to Julian. Julian Hayes stepped forward and connected a tablet to the room's main projector. The screen descended from the ceiling. At 4:02 a.m. last Saturday, Vivian narrated as a timeline appeared on the screen. The Title IV federal freeze on the Cayman accounts was lifted for exactly 90 seconds. This required a level of clearance that Alaric Sterling did not possess. It required a chairman's override code. A bank log appeared on the screen. It showed the user ID Montgomery admin. That proves nothing. Silas snapped through a bead of sweat finally appeared on his temple. My credentials could have been spoofed. Alaric is a hacker. Everyone knows that. True, Vivian conceded. Identity theft is possible, but physical location is harder to fake. The slide changed. It showed a map of the world with a red line tracing a signal. We traced the IP address used to authorize the override, Vivian said. It didn't come from the prison. It didn't come from the office. It came from a residential secure line at 44 Ocean Drive, East Hampton. She looked down at Silas. How was your weekend at the beach house, Silas? The board members gasped. They turned to look at their chairman, eyes wide with horror. This is circumstantial, Silas shouted, slamming his hand on the table. He was losing control. The veneer of the calm patriarch was cracking, revealing the greedy, desperate man beneath. You're trying to frame me to save your husband. I'm not trying to save Alaric, Vivian said coldly. I'm the one who put him in jail. Remember. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small metallic flash drive. She placed it on the granite table with a soft clack. Alaric knew you, Silas. He knew that one day you would cut his throat to save yourself, so he took out an insurance policy. Vivian looked at the board. Alaric recorded every conversation he had with you regarding the pension fund optimization strategy over the last 18 months. He kept the files on an encrypted partition of his phone. He gave me the password this morning. No, Silas whispered. He wouldn't. Play it, Julianne. Julianne tapped the screen. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the boardroom's surround sound system. Silas, I'm worried. The auditors are sniffing around the R&D budget. Alaric's voice sounding nervous. Relax, Alaric. I have the compliance team in my pocket. Just move the next tranche to the Cayman account. If anyone asks, it's a capital investment write-off. I'll take my 40% in the usual way. Just keep your wife distracted and buy that girl of yours something shiny. Silas's voice arrogant, distinct, and undeniable. The recording stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Silas Montgomery sat frozen. His face had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a wax figure. He looked at the faces around the table, men he had golfed with, dined with, manipulated for years. He saw no loyalty. He saw only revulsion. The $12 million. Vivian continued driving the final nail into the coffin was transferred to a numbered account in Zurich. We have already contacted the Swiss authorities with the FBI's assistance. The account is frozen. The money will be returned to the pension fund within the week. She turned to the two men in dark suits standing by the door. Agent Miller, she said. The men stepped forward. One of them pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously in the quiet room. Silas Montgomery, the agent said, his voice flat and professional. You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Silas stood up slowly. He looked old. The vitality that had filled him 10 minutes ago was gone, siphoned away by the truth. He looked at Vivian with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You played the long game, Silas rasped. I thought you were just the decoration. I was never the decoration, Silas. Vivian said, her eyes hard as diamonds. I was the foundation, and you just tried to crack it. You'll destroy the company, Silas spat as the agent spun him around and cuffed his hands behind his back. The stock will tank. The shareholders will flee. You're ruling over ashes. I'll rebuild it, Vivian said, without the rot. The agents marched Silas out of the room. The board members watched him go, unable to look away. When the door finally clicked shut, the tension in the room broke, replaced by a vacuum of leadership. All eyes turned to Vivian. Greg Pender cleared his throat. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. Mrs. Sterling, Vivian, what happens now? Do we call legal? Do we issue a press release? Vivian walked to the head of the table. She looked at the empty chair where Silas had sat for 30 years. She didn't sit in it. Instead, she pushed it aside and stood at the head of the table, leaning her hands on the granite. "First," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "we are going to issue a joint statement with the DOJ. Full transparency. We admit the fault, we announce the recovery of the funds, and we announce the purge of the leadership responsible." She looked at Greg. "Second, Greg, you are going to resign. Effective immediately. You knew about the irregularities and said nothing. You can keep your pension, but you leave the building today." Greg nodded rapidly, looking relieved he wasn't leaving in handcuffs. Yes, of course." "And third," Vivian said, looking around the table at the remaining survivors, "we are going to rebrand. The name Sterling Hay is dead. It represents the past. We need a future." "Who will lead us?" a board member asked. "We have no CEO, no chairman." Julian Hayes stepped forward. "I believe," he said, adjusting his glasses, "that the bylaws allow the board to appoint a permanent CEO by a simple majority vote. And I believe there is only one person in this room who just saved this company from total collapse." The board members looked at Vivian. They saw the woman who had outsmarted her husband, outmaneuvered the chairman, and recovered $12 million in stolen assets in under a week. They didn't see a socialite anymore. They saw a shark. One by one, the hands went up. "Motion carried," Julian said with a smile. Vivian let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 20 years. She looked out the window at the skyline, at the city that Alaric had wanted to conquer. He had wanted to be a king. He hadn't realized that the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. 6 months later. The office was unrecognizable. The dark mahogany and leather that Alaric had favored the gentleman's club aesthetic was gone. In its place was glass, steel, and light. The logo on the wall behind the desk was New VS Global. Vivian sat at the desk reviewing the Q3 earnings report. The stock was up 18%. The rebranding had worked. The market loved a redemption story, especially one that involved a forensic audit. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from a number she didn't have saved, but she recognized the area code. Upstate New York. Near the prison. "I saw the Forbes cover. You look good." Vivian stared at the screen for a moment. Alaric. He was 5 months into a 7-year sentence. He had cooperated fully thanks to her deal, but he was still paying the price. She didn't reply. She deleted the message and placed the phone face down. A knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. Chloe Valance peeked her head in. The former mistress looked different. The flashy designer clothes were gone, replaced by sensible business casual. She looked tired but focused. "Ms. Sterling," Chloe asked tentatively, "I have the files for the charity gala you asked for." Vivian had hired her. It was a move that baffled everyone, including Julianne. But Vivian knew that Chloe had talent, she just lacked a moral compass. Vivian was providing one. And besides, keeping your enemies close was good strategy. Keeping the woman who ruined your marriage on the payroll as a junior analyst was a power move of the highest order. "Thank you, Chloe," Vivian said. "Leave them on the desk." And Chloe. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. Make sure the seating chart for the gala is perfect this time. We don't want any surprises." Chloe flushed a deep red. "No, ma'am. Never again." Chloe hurried out. Vivian stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. She looked down at the streets of Manhattan, the cars looking like ants below. Silas Montgomery was currently awaiting trial in a federal holding facility. His lawyers were trying to plead insanity, claiming he was too old to understand the technology. It wouldn't work. The recordings were damning. He would die in prison. Vivian touched the cold glass. She was alone at the top, but she didn't feel lonely. She felt capable. She had spent half her life being the woman behind the man, the silent partner, the keeper of secrets. She had balanced the books while they took the credit. No more. Vivian Sterling turned back to her desk, picked up her pen, and went back to work. The audit was closed. The account was settled. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. And that is how Vivian Sterling turned a public humiliation into a corporate takeover, proving that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. Alaric wanted a trophy and Silas wanted a payday, but they both forgot the golden rule: never audit the person who keeps your secrets. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. What would you have done in Vivian's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.